I bought one of those lock miter router bits, and it turns out that you have to route the boards at 90 degrees. So I'm going to route one side of the joint on the standard router table, then I'll switch the router to my horizontal router table, and I'll route the other side of the joint. The main problem is that this wood is a bit hard, and the 45-degree lock miter router bit is a very cheap one. Yes, we can expect to see wood burns, but we'll also look at some other issues that come up when making wooden joints with these bits. To reduce the stress on the bit, I'll make a first pass to remove material. Let's go with the first pass. Well, you already know that when I put X2, it means the video is sped up 2 times. I repeat the same thing on a second board. I move the fence to its final position, and I'll do the final routing. That's not the best push block, but it's what I have for now. And I do the second pass on both boards. Let's pay attention to the big problem I ran into. When routing the wood, the shape of the bit and the way it enters the wood exert force that tries to lift the board, and it can start being pulled up more and more toward the back. Look at that. At the entry, a perfect cut. But look at this peak, and how it stops being a peak and becomes thicker toward the back of the board. Look at that. Terrible. That's completely useless. First of all, I checked that the board is nice and flat, and that the cut is nice and straight. Okay, before fixing that, I routed 2 boards the same way to see how the joint would turn out. We see that we can't make a 45-degree joint, but they do make an interesting joint like this, kind of like 2 parquet boards. You'd have to adjust the bit so that the boards align properly, and maybe add a tiny bevel along the top line. Well, what if I route the second board at 90 degrees like this? It's not easy to work this way, and that fence gives very little support to the board. And the same thing happens again. The mitre lock router bit pulls up the board at the back. Right at the entry, it's more or less okay. And as we go toward the back, we see how the routing gets off track. Look how burned the wood is. That was expected. Cheap bit and hard wood. Okay, first pass on the first board. I try to apply downward pressure on the back, but this isn't the best push block for that. And when I press the wood down, it slides terribly on the plywood. Second pass, also pressing downward. Look, this time I got a pretty good cut, from start to finish. And now the vertical routing. But I'm not going to do it like this. I'm going to turn it into horizontal routing using my horizontal router table. Here, I routed it like this. Now, I'll move the bit to my horizontal router table. I'll route the other part of the joint like this. And finally, we'll see how it fits. First problem. The diameter of the bit is bigger than the hole in the insert plate. My solution. I have a half-round file, and that insert plate is aluminum, so I'll remove the inner edge. Anyway, I need to buy another one of these insert plates for the router table. Now it clears and won't rub against the metal when spinning. I install the palm router with the bit already mounted, and I make sure it doesn't touch the metal. I adjust the tilting base of the router. And now, I adjust how much the 45-degree bit sticks out. I make sure the table and plate are at 90 degrees. I check that everything is properly aligned. I think it is. But I'm going to lift the table a bit and route the board in 2 passes, so I don't push this cheap bit too hard. The first cut turned out pretty good, but again, the wood is really burned. I adjust the table for the final routing. I need to remember to press down so the bit doesn't lift the wood. Well, I'll say it's a pretty decent cut. And this time the wood didn't come out that burned. I lie. You can see it clearly. Here we see how the cut is different on both sides of the joint. We join the boards. And it's a pretty decent joint. With softer wood, it would probably be easier to route. And maybe the issue of the board being pulled up at the back wouldn't be so bad, since the bit would cut the wood more easily and wouldn't apply as much force trying to lift it. Thanks for watching the video, and if you like my videos, subscribe and hit the bell.